Despite the judge's sneers and the weight of an entire courtroom's skepticism pressing down on her, Karoline took a measured breath, her pulse steadying with a newfound certainty. She had spent her life navigating the complexities of human behavior, analyzing motives, unraveling deception. This was no different. As the prosecution smugly prepared for what they believed would be the final blow, Karoline's lips curled into the faintest of smiles. They had underestimated her for the last time. Because in mere moments, she was about to reveal something that would leave the entire courtroom speechless, and turn the case, and their assumptions, upside down. Karoline Leavitt was not your average young woman. Raised in a small town, she exhibited extraordinary intelligence from an early age, often outpacing her peers both academically and socially. With her bright blue eyes and determined spirit, she stood out in a world that often underestimated those who looked unassuming. Karoline graduated at the top of her class from a prestigious university, where she earned a dual degree in law and psychology, showcasing her ability to navigate the complexities of human behavior alongside legal principles. Her passion for justice was ignited by personal experiences. Having witnessed family members struggle against a flawed legal system, she dedicated herself to ensuring that others would not face the same injustices. Her high IQ, consistently measured above 150, allowed her to analyze cases with a depth that left many professionals astonished. While most viewed her as shy or reserved, beneath the surface lay a fierce advocate armed with razor-sharp analytical skills. Despite her impressive credentials, Karoline's journey was fraught with challenges. Misunderstandings and societal biases often led others to perceive her brilliance as aloofness or arrogance. As she entered the courtroom for the trial that would test her resolve and intellect, she felt the weight of those misconceptions heavy on her shoulders. The judge presiding over her case had already made up his mind about her capabilities based on superficial judgments rather than merit. But today was different. Today was an opportunity to unveil the true depth of her knowledge. While the judge looked down upon her, dismissing any hope of a competent defense, Karoline prepared to turn their perceptions upside down. With steely determination, she steeled herself for the battle ahead, not just for her innocence but for anyone who had ever been underestimated based on appearances alone. The events leading to Karoline Leavitt's wrongful accusation began innocently enough, rooted in an unfortunate series of misunderstandings fueled by envy and misinformation. It all started when she landed a coveted internship at a prominent law firm, where her diligence and innovative ideas quickly made her a standout among the junior associates. However, this success did not sit well with everyone. Jealousy simmered among some colleagues who felt threatened by her potential. During a high-stakes case involving embezzlement, crucial documents went missing just as the firm was about to finalize its argument. With tempers flaring, suspicion quickly fell on Karoline, who had access to the files due to her role in preparing evidence for trial. Without any substantial proof, rumors spread, painting her as the mastermind behind the disappearance, driven by ambition and resentment towards her more experienced peers. As the accusations escalated, Karoline found herself plunged into an overwhelming legal nightmare. News of her impending trial circulated within both professional and personal circles. Opinions swayed rapidly as whispers about her character filled the air. Friends abandoned her out of fear or belief in her guilt, while colleagues distanced themselves to avoid association with scandal. Facing charges for theft and obstruction of justice was not only debilitating on a personal level, it shattered Karoline's once promising career path. The pressure was immense, eroding not only her reputation but also the foundations of self-trust she had built over years of hard work. Each day in court felt like a battle, one that threatened to ruin everything she had ever fought for. Despite these formidable challenges and heartbreaks, Karoline clung steadfastly to hope. The very essence of what she aimed to achieve, seeking justice, now rested on not just saving herself but revealing the truth behind a web of deceit spun around her. Time was running out. She needed a strategy that would expose the lies constraining her future. As Karoline stepped into the courtroom, a chill swept over her. The air was thick with tension, punctuated by the murmur of spectators who had gathered to witness the proceedings. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, casting harsh shadows across the polished wooden benches, yet the room felt anything but welcoming. She could feel the weight of judgment pressing down on her as she took her place at the defendant's table, acutely aware of every pair of eyes scrutinizing her. The judge, a stout man with graying hair and a penchant for theatrics, entered with an air of authority that stifled any hope for fair treatment. His gaze landed on Karoline, and a smirk crept across his face, a clear indication that he viewed her as nothing more than an inexperienced child playing at being an adult. "So, Miss Leavitt," he began, leaning forward as if to emphasize his superiority, "are you ready to explain why you thought you could meddle in matters far beyond your capability?" Laughter rippled through the courtroom, and Karoline felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment. The mockery echoed in her mind, but beneath it all simmered a fierce determination. She was not just there to defend herself, she was there to dismantle the misconceptions that had clouded her reputation. The judge's derision only fueled her resolve to rise above the belittlement. As the prosecution began laying out their case, Karoline concentrated on maintaining her composure. Every piece of evidence presented against her felt like a dagger aimed at her character, yet she remained steadfast in her conviction that the truth would ultimately prevail. She carefully observed the proceedings, mentally cataloging inconsistencies and falsehoods. In that moment, despite the judge's mocking tone and the accusatory glances from the gallery, she knew she possessed the skills needed to outwit them all. With each passing moment, Karoline transformed from a target of ridicule into a formidable force, ready to turn the tide and reveal her true brilliance. The courtroom's atmosphere might have been charged with negativity, but within her, a spark ignited, an unwavering belief that justice would be served. The judge's demeanor was a disheartening spectacle for Karoline as he took his seat, a self-satisfied grin plastered across his face. His imposing figure loomed over the courtroom, and with each word he spoke, it became increasingly clear that he relished the opportunity to belittle her. "Miss Leavitt," he began, his voice dripping with condescension, "I trust you've brought your crayons today, since we'll need to simplify the proceedings for you." Laughter rippled through the audience, and Karoline's heart sank further. As the trial progressed, the judge continued his tirade of mockery. When Karoline attempted to present her own arguments or challenge a piece of evidence, he interrupted her with exaggerated sighs and eye rolls. "Let's not waste the court's time with your little fantasies," he sneered, making it evident that he considered her attempts at defense laughable. Each dismissal felt like another layer of humiliation piled on top of her already fragile confidence. During a particularly crucial moment, as she tried to clarify a legal point regarding the chain of custody for evidence, the judge interjected curtly, "Ah yes, I forgot. This must be very complicated for someone who thinks they're a lawyer." His words struck her like a physical blow. She could feel the heat rise in her cheeks as she fought to maintain her composure amidst the ridicule. Karoline noticed how he seemed to enjoy parading his authority over her, deliberately leaning back in his chair as if to emphasize her supposed ineptitude. The condescending tone of his voice echoed in her mind long after he spoke. She knew she had to rise above this mockery. Every sarcastic remark only fueled her determination to expose the truth and demonstrate that she was far from incompetent. In that courtroom filled with laughter and derision directed at her, Karoline's resolve hardened. She understood that this trial was not just about proving her innocence. It was also about dismantling the judge's perception of her and revealing the legal genius hidden beneath layers of scorn. Behind the facade of embarrassment and ridicule, Karoline transformed her vulnerability into a catalyst for meticulous preparation. Late at night, after the courtroom sessions, she would retreat to her small apartment, where the clamor of the outside world faded into silence. Surrounded by stacks of legal texts and case files, she immersed herself in research, poring over precedents and meticulously analyzing the prosecution's arguments. Using her dual expertise in law and psychology, Karoline devised a strategy that would not only highlight the discrepancies in the case against her but also challenge the credibility of those testifying against her. With each legal principle she uncovered, her confidence grew. Karoline created detailed flowcharts mapping out the timeline of events surrounding the embezzlement case, pinpointing where others had misrepresented facts. In the quiet of her home office, she practiced articulating her defense out loud, honing her ability to speak clearly and persuasively. Each mock argument was delivered to an imaginary audience. She imagined their reactions as she dismantled weak points in the prosecution's narrative. Even though she felt isolated, Karoline found empowerment in this solitude. Her isolation became a sanctuary for intellectual growth. To prepare for possible confrontations with the judge, she analyzed his previous rulings and opinions on similar cases, crafting responses that would not only refute his queries but also turn his mocking tone back on him. She visualized scenarios where he attempted to undermine her arguments, ready to counteract with well-researched rebuttals. As the trial date loomed closer and tensions mounted, an unwavering focus settled within her. Every late night spent studying and strategizing fortified her mental acuity. The echoes of the judge's sarcasm faded into the background as Karoline began to see them as fuel for a fierce intellectual showdown, a chance to showcase not only her innocence but the brilliance that lay beneath the layers of doubt cast by others. She knew that when she stepped back into that courtroom, it wouldn't just be about defending herself. It would be about reclaiming her narrative and proving that she was more than what they believed her to be. The turning point in Karoline's trial arrived on a seemingly ordinary morning, but tension hung palpably in the air as she prepared to present her first piece of evidence. Despite the weight of uncertainty, she stood tall at the defendant's table, her heart racing with a mix of anxiety and determination. The judge had just dismissed her previous attempts to challenge the prosecution, but today was different. As the courtroom settled into an expectant silence, Karoline began to methodically lay out her argument regarding the missing documents. She carefully introduced a series of meticulously organized charts she had developed during her late-night preparations, each highlighting discrepancies in the timeline put forth by the prosecution. With a steady voice, she pointed out how vital documents were accessed by multiple people within the firm, effectively dismantling their assertion that she alone had motive and opportunity for wrongdoing. The judge, momentarily taken aback, leaned forward in his chair as Karoline slid a copy of an email chain across the table for everyone to see. "This email," she declared confidently, "was sent just 2 days before the missing documents were noted. It shows discussions related to this case involving multiple parties." Moments like these halted his usual mockery in its tracks. He glanced nervously at the jurors, sensing a shift in their perception. Drawing upon her background in psychology, she framed her arguments not only with legal principles but with persuasive storytelling. She illustrated how office dynamics could distort perceptions and manipulate facts, reminding everyone that one person's ambition is not synonymous with deceit. As her presentation unfolded, previously skeptical whispers among the audience quieted. They began to lean in, captivated by how clearly she articulated the flaws in the prosecution's narrative. The atmosphere shifted from one of derision to attentive curiosity. Even the judge seemed unable to suppress his surprise as he processed her points, finally acknowledging that perhaps this young woman was capable of far more than he initially believed. In that moment, Karoline felt not only the gravity of her defense tangible, but also the steady resolve within her solidifying into something unshakable. Today was not merely about saving herself, it was an affirmation of her intellect and strength. She was no longer just defending against accusations. She was claiming ownership of her story and proving that intelligence transcends appearances. As Karoline continued to dismantle the prosecution's case, her mastery of legal jargon and principles became increasingly evident. Armed with her meticulously organized charts and email evidence, she leaned into the complexities of law that she had studied so thoroughly. "Your Honor," she began, her tone steady and confident, "let's address the concept of mens rea, intention behind the act. The prosecution has failed to establish that I had any malicious intent or motive." She cited relevant case law, invoking precedents that illustrated how mere access to documents does not equate to culpability. In United States v. Chronic, the courts have reaffirmed that without demonstrable intent, accusations fall flat. I had no reason to maliciously act against my firm. In fact, it was in my interest to uphold its integrity. The judge's eyebrow raised slightly, an indication of the shift occurring within the courtroom. Karoline proceeded seamlessly through her arguments, employing logical reasoning to highlight inconsistencies within the prosecution's narrative. "If I were indeed the perpetrator," Why would I keep records of communications that depicted me as a team player? These emails not only proved my innocence but demonstrate how the dynamics within the firm were misconstrued to fit a narrative. As she articulated her case, she even turned the judge's condescension against him, concluding with, "Perhaps I'm not the only one who misunderstands ambition. Law requires clarity of thought and purpose. Let's not conflate ambition with dishonesty." The courtroom fell silent. Even the audience seemed spellbound by her eloquence. Karoline's sharp reasoning reshaped the atmosphere, and whispers of admiration rippled through spectators. The judge's previous sarcasm diminished as he struggled to maintain his authority, clearly taken aback by her unexpected prowess. In that moment, Karoline transformed from a target of ridicule into a formidable presence, demonstrating that her intelligence and understanding of the law were far beyond what anyone had assumed. With each argument fortified by legal knowledge, she realized that this was not merely a quest for personal vindication. It was a chance to redefine her identity in a space that had once demeaned her intellect. She stood poised at the intersection of vulnerability and strength, ready to claim her rightful place in the legal world. As Karoline's defense unfolded, the transformation in the judge's demeanor became increasingly evident. Initially, he sat with an air of superiority, arms crossed and a disinterested frown that seemed to suggest he was merely indulging in a tedious farce. However, as the trial progressed and Karoline began to dismantle the prosecution's arguments with clarity and confidence, subtle changes in his expression began to emerge. At first, when she presented her organized evidence and cited relevant case law, the judge raised an eyebrow, a flicker of intrigue cutting through his previous derision. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat as she continued to articulate complex legal concepts with ease. The mockery that once characterized his tone began to fade, replaced by a growing sense of confusion. Was it possible that this young woman he dismissed was actually displaying a formidable intellect? As Karoline delved deeper into her arguments, the judge's posture slowly changed. He leaned forward, intrigued rather than dismissive. When she confidently invoked precedents that aligned perfectly with her situation, asserting how intent must be established, he started glancing at his notes, more fervently, almost as if searching for points he previously considered undeniable. By the time Karoline turned the courtroom's attention toward inconsistencies in the prosecution's narrative, it was clear even to him that something extraordinary was happening. She delivered a compelling narrative and logical analysis that left no room for doubt about her innocence. The laughter he had once elicited through mockery had transformed into tense silence, punctuated only by murmurs of surprise from spectators. Finally, as she concluded her arguments with pointed remarks about ambition versus deceit, challenging his earlier condescension head-on, the judge's face betrayed unmistakable signs of realization. He had underestimated her potential all along. The confidence she exuded created ripples through the courtroom. It was evident that the tide had turned. The once impassive judge now grappled visibly with uncertainty. Could he recast his judgment based on newfound evidence? In those moments of revelation, he realized an undeniable truth. This young woman was not only capable but a force to be reckoned with. As Karoline stood resolute before him, poised and articulate, his respect was born from a place he never expected, humility towards an intellect that had outmatched him on every level. As Karoline continued to lay out her compelling defense, a palpable shift overtook the courtroom audience. Initially skeptical and influenced by the judge's mockery, they now found themselves captivated by her sharp intellect and unwavering confidence. Whispers of admiration began to ripple through the seats, as spectators leaned forward, eager to catch every word she articulated with precision. A woman seated near the front exchanged glances with her neighbor, nodding in agreement as Karoline referenced pivotal legal precedents. "She's really got this," the woman murmured, a sense of newfound respect in her voice. Meanwhile, jurors shifted in their seats, visibly reconsidering their initial perceptions of Karoline based on her previous presentations filled with uncertainty and self-doubt. At one point, as Karoline deftly exposed inconsistencies in the prosecution's narrative, an audible gasp resonated from the back row, quickly followed by an enthusiastic murmur. A young man who had initially been dismissive now leaned over to his friend, whispering excitedly, "I never thought she had it in her." Look at how she's turning this around. The atmosphere in the room transformed further as applause erupted spontaneously from a corner of the gallery after Karoline delivered a particularly incisive point about intent versus action. The judge raised an eyebrow but made no move to silence them. He was clearly caught in a moment that undermined his previous authority. A sentiment echoed throughout the room. Karoline could feel their support buoying her resolve. It wasn't just about proving her innocence anymore. It was about reshaping their understanding of justice itself. In their eyes, she was becoming more than a defendant. She was embodying a principle that transcended personal stakes. As she finished another powerful statement, the applause crescendoed again, this time more unified, as people began to see not just a wrongly accused individual, but a brilliant mind challenging the very fabric of injustice. In that powerful moment of validation, Karoline understood that she had not only gained the audience's support but also sparked a broader conversation about merit and capability. With each reaction from those watching intently, she felt empowered to push forward, ready to stake her claim not just for herself but for anyone who had ever been underestimated or dismissed based on appearances alone. As the trial neared its culmination, Karoline prepared to deliver her conclusive arguments, a moment she knew would be pivotal in proving her innocence. The courtroom was thick with anticipation. The once derisive judge now sat straight, his expression betraying a hint of uncertainty. As she rose to speak, a hush fell over the audience, all eyes on her, as if they sensed the significance of what was about to unfold. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she began, her voice steady and commanding. "I stand before you not just to defend my innocence but to reveal the truth that has been obscured by jealousy and misrepresentation." She paused for effect, deliberately scanning the faces around her. Jurors, spectators, even the judge, all were engaged, hanging on her every word. Karoline seamlessly wove together the threads of her defense, pulling from legal precedents and evidentiary inconsistencies she had meticulously documented throughout the trial. "The prosecution claims I acted alone out of malice, however," she continued. "The evidence clearly indicates a pattern of behavior among several individuals within the firm. The timeline of events and email communications demonstrate a collective involvement that cannot be ignored." With each point she articulated, Karoline's confidence surged. She produced a final piece of evidence, a document that had previously gone unnoticed. "This contract," she stated decisively, "proves that I had no access to critical documents after they were flagged missing. It was signed by my supervisor and confirms my role as a mere assistant during this time." Gasps echoed through the courtroom as realization struck. This document not only exonerated her but implicated others in a scheme far more complex than anyone had imagined. The judge's brow furrowed as he absorbed this new information, his previous skepticism fading into disbelief. As she concluded her argument with an impassioned appeal for justice and truth, a wave of support surged through the audience. Applause erupted spontaneously from those who had once doubted her capabilities, transforming the courtroom atmosphere entirely. Even the judge, visibly shaken by Karoline's revelation and newfound momentum, struggled to maintain his composure. In that climactic moment, Karoline stood empowered, not merely as a defendant fighting for her freedom, but as a beacon of resilience against injustice. She had turned the tide in her favor, shocking everyone involved and proving that beneath societal biases lay an undeniable brilliance capable of overcoming adversity. The realization hung thick in the air. Karoline Leavitt was not only innocent but also a force to be reckoned with in the pursuit of justice. In the aftermath of her victory, Karoline Leavitt found herself standing not only as an exonerated individual but also as a beacon of hope for those wrongfully accused. The courtroom that had once been a site of ridicule became a space of triumph, and her name began to circulate as a testament to resilience and intelligence in the face of adversity. As she left the courthouse, a sense of relief washed over her, mingling with the adrenaline of victory. Friends and supporters surrounded her, offering congratulations and encouragement that solidified her belief in herself. However, the battle was not just personal. It was also an awakening to the systemic issues surrounding wrongful accusations. Inspired by her experience, Karoline decided to channel her newfound voice into advocacy work. She began collaborating with organizations that aimed to support individuals who faced similar situations, those marginalized or dismissed due to biases inherent in the legal system. Karoline started hosting workshops where she shared her story and provided guidance on navigating the complexities of law for those without access to resources. Her dual degree in law and psychology became invaluable as she helped individuals develop strength in their own narratives, empowering them to seek justice with confidence. Meanwhile, repercussions for the judge came into play. Following Karoline's trial, there were discussions about his conduct, which had strayed from appropriate courtroom decorum. Recognizing the importance of integrity within the judicial system, local advocacy groups pressed for accountability that sparked a broader conversation about judicial bias and the treatment of defendants. As Karoline's story gained traction, it led to calls for better training and oversight to prevent other individuals from facing similar mockery and derision in their most vulnerable moments. Through it all, Karoline transformed from a victim of circumstance into a fierce advocate, demonstrating that true strength lies not just in overcoming personal struggles but in lifting others in their journeys toward justice. Her story served to remind everyone that intelligence and resilience are often underestimated but can ultimately prevail against even the most daunting odds. With an unwavering commitment to fighting for fairness, Karoline set forth on a path not merely defined by her past but enriched by her vision for a more just and equitable legal landscape for all. Karoline Leavitt's journey through the tumultuous landscape of wrongful accusations has been a powerful testament to the strength of resilience and intelligence. Her story underscores the critical importance of challenging stereotypes that often cloud our judgment, particularly within the legal system. In a world where perceptions can be heavily influenced by biases and appearances, Karoline has emerged not just as a survivor but as an advocate for those who find themselves unjustly labeled and dismissed. Her experiences serve as a poignant reminder that competence is not always visible at first glance. Many individuals, especially women and minorities, face barriers that obscure their potential and capabilities. Karoline's triumph in court challenges us all to reflect on our biases and consider how we can create a more equitable environment for everyone, regardless of their background or past mistakes. In advocating for others, Karoline encourages all of us to wield our voices and experiences as instruments of change. Whether through workshops, community outreach, or conversations that spark awareness, individuals can actively contribute to dismantling the prejudices that permeate our society. As readers, we are invited to reassess our views on competence and to recognize that intelligence can manifest in many forms. It is vital to listen, learn, and uplift the narratives of those who have been marginalized. Karoline's journey illustrates that when we challenge our perceptions and support one another in the pursuit of justice, we enrich not only individual lives but also the collective fabric of our communities. Ultimately, her story is one of hope and empowerment, an encouragement for each of us to embrace resilience, advocate for fairness, and remain vigilant against stereotypes that seek to undermine our shared humanity. Let Karoline's experience inspire us to seek truth and justice for all, reminding us that true strength lies in understanding and lifting one another up as we navigate the complexities of life together.